Hi, my name's Jordan Marshall. I'm chairing today's session. We're really excited for this one. It's the first session in our Education Estates Takeover Day today. So today's topic is on how is construction going to deliver the UK's school building needs. And we've got a really great panel who I'm actually going to ask to introduce themselves, just so we can hear from them why they're interested in this topic. So maybe Matt, if we start with you, if you could just give us a brief intro.
Yeah, sure. My name's Matt Bennion. I'm the Chief Executive of Reds 10. We're a specialist modular contractor and part of the DfE's MMC framework. So we have a vested interest in sharing our views today.
No worries, Claire.
Hi, morning everybody. I'm Claire Wadlin. I'm a studio director and architect at HLM Architects. We've got studios nationwide, London, Sheffield and Glasgow. So yes, and people who know us will know that we've been delivering education projects for quite a long time now.
And Simon?
Hi, good morning. I'm Simon Grayson from HKS Architects. We're an international practice. We're headquartered in the US, but in the UK we operate out of London, which is obviously where I work from. We go across multiple sectors, but we're heavily involved in public procurement, both healthcare and schools, obviously, which is why we've been invited here today. And I've probably been working in schools with HKS for a little over 12 years now, so a fair bit of experience despite appearances.
Brilliant. Okay, so as you can see, we have a really strong panel today and we're really excited about jumping into the conversation. Just a few logistical points first. Our speakers are going to run us through some presentations to kick things off. If at any point during those presentations, anyone in the audience has a question, please feel free to send those through. We'll cover off as many of them as we can in the Q&A portion of the session, which will sort of be the second half. And so please send them through at any time though. We're happy to get those rolling in as things continue. Moreover, if you hear something today and you want to go back and listen to it afterwards, the session will be available on demand within half an hour of it wrapping up. And it's available via the same link that you just joined now. So if you think that there's something you want to review or you think there's someone else in your team who would really benefit from listening, it's available online on demand for free at its conclusion. So I think that's probably enough from me for now. I think Simon is going to start things off for us. So I'm just going to make you presenter, Simon. And we can kick things off.
Can we see that?
That's perfect.
There we go, John. Thank you very much. So yeah, okay. So as I said, so I've been working in the education sector with HKS for probably a little over 12 years now. What I wanted to do with this was frame my short talk around picking out what I think are some of the sort of the key design challenges that we tend to face as architects and designers working on schools, and then sort of end with two key considerations which we're trying to take away just from our sort of recent experience and our considerations we want to roll out across the next wave of schools we start to design. And my experience at HKS, it's gone across a wide variety of procurement routes and school procurement processes. I started back in BSF. I've gone through various iterations of the PSBB framework. We're working on the SRP program at the moment with the DfE. And in between that, I've looked across sort of various FE, HC schemes. We've looked at direct appointments to trusts. But across all of those, I think what we tend to see is that the key design challenges are usually the same sort of issues. And what I wanted to do was just really go through what I sort of saw as the six, I think I've got six here, key design challenges that we often face. So starting off on our slide, and I'm afraid they're not too sort of flashy, so hopefully the content is slightly better. But what I wanted to start on was talking about probably what we all know. You know, one of the big design challenges we face is to do with the condition of the existing schools we've got. The majority of the projects that I work on tend to be on existing sites where we've got a school building in occupation. So inevitably, our work tends to be addressing issues with buildings in a poor condition. And you know, it's due to a variety of reasons, I suppose. There's historic underinvestment, some people might say. We come across various schools where maintenance and repairs just haven't been carried out. But we're also seeing a lot now of the existing school estate just simply getting to the end of its building life. You know, structures don't last forever. So one of the first challenges we're facing really is what do we do with some of this estate? Do we keep it? Do we demolish it? Is there ways we can adapt it? You know, a whole host of questions there. And that question about condition tends to be related or goes hand in hand with that second point I've got in terms of funding. So, you know, there's issues with how past funding might not have met the demands for schools, but also as designers, we're being continually challenged to ensure we're designing best, you know, for best value on the projects we're delivering. So what we're very keen to sort of consider and what we see as a design challenge is making sure we're not baking into these schools quality issues that are going to appear in future and inadvertently doing that by seeking sort of best value. So there's sort of two design challenges for us that go hand in hand there. And also, I think slightly related to that, I've got another challenge which I put down in terms of growing demand. And I said a lot of our work is to do with existing schools. Most of those projects are also, alongside condition issues, they're tackling growing demand for schools and education in a certain area. And the big design challenge for us there is looking not only about how we you know, fit that growth into an existing school in a way that doesn't take away what might be particularly special from that school. But more often than not, we tend to find that demand's been in place before we get there and get a chance to look at the project. So similar to condition issues, how those tend to sort of develop over time, you might find that growing demand has meant the school has squeezed pupils in where they can, just compounding other design challenges that we have to face. So three sort of immediate design challenges that spring to mind, and in some respects, three of those are interrelated in certain ways. To keep going, just topping up on other sort of key design challenges we often face. I mean, I've put here schools, they don't stop. You know, you can't just shut down a school for the duration of the build. It's very difficult to move them off site. On the projects we look at, you know, we tend to find that there is no other alternative provision or sufficient space for significant temporary accommodation to put the school into. So we're facing design challenges in how in addressing these condition needs, these demand needs, growth and whatever, you know, how do we do that around a school that's got to remain in operation, and how do we do that in a way that doesn't impact on the education experience of those pupils? So you know, these can be really difficult challenges to unpick, particularly if we're looking at sites where we're taking an existing school that might be at the end of its design life and we're trying to put a whole new facility on there. You can guarantee generally that the best location to put a school on the site is probably where it is at the moment, and in terms of how that operates around existing site constraints. So we can find ourselves unpicking some really complex site challenges about construction phasing. Second point I've got on there, you know, quality and safety, and I don't think in any way that this is an issue that's unique to education design or school design in the country. I think there is, you know, I think everyone would agree there is probably an issue within design and construction and in the existing estate that we have around quality and safety. We've all got to have a serious think about how we're going to adapt and address these issues. You know, there's implications of things like the Building Safety Bill, which we need to start incorporating into our design processes, new regulatory requirements that might be coming. Just being thorough in the way, you know, we are making sure we're translating information across from one design stage or one procurement stage to the next, and you know, issues like this, the idea of the golden thread. I think we've got a real design challenge as professionals to look at how we make sure we are delivering quality, and that's not just in you know, construction quality, it's design quality as well. So it's being thorough at the early briefing stages of projects to understand what a school really understands as a quality establishment for them. What are the real design drivers or the teaching requirements that they have? You know, we do a lot of work with special schools, SEN schools, where there are very specific quality requirements around what the internal finishes might be. And it's always a design challenge to make sure we're capturing those accurately and then making sure it's translated through to a finished building. And the last challenge, you know, I think no presentation like this would be complete without mentioning it. We've had COVID and pretty unique working situations for, you know, a good over a year and a half now. And I think, you know, we probably all hope we're seeing the end or the back end of this pandemic. We're starting to move out of it, getting back to normal working practices, both for designers and for schools. You know, that's thrown up huge challenges. I'm obviously sat in a bedroom at the moment giving a presentation. There's been huge challenges with collaboration that we've had to tackle over the last year in design. But what I wanted to focus on this is, I think what COVID has thrown up is questions about how flexible and adaptable we can really make buildings to sort of rise to these challenges. And, you know, I don't have the solutions immediately to this. This was a pretty unique situation. There's no guarantee that the next sort of earth-shaking event is going to be of the same format, but we can pretty much guarantee that something like this will happen again. And if it's not within our lifetimes, it will be within the lifetimes of the buildings we're looking to deliver. So we do need to consider how issues like this need to be incorporated into our designs or our design responses. What I ended on then, you know, there's 6 sort of key design challenges I put there, and you know, they're all interrelated, they're all complicated, there's all facets to these design challenges that I haven't mentioned that also need considering. But really what we've started to question ourselves within the practice, and in looking at how we're going to gear up for designing schools in the next few waves, we're trying to focus on 2 sort of key questions, which I've summarized here. And the first of those is to do with flexibility and adaptability. You know, when we're looking at the schools, we're always looking to design for flexibility. It's a requirement baked into the generic design brief. But we're starting to question whether we've got the right focus. You know, do we really understand what the best approach to flexibility and adaptability is? And what do I mean by that? Well, you know, we've focused on providing buildings that are easy to reconfigure, as an example, you know, regular structural grids, careful positioning of services. You know, we've taken the approach that flexibility and adaptability is about providing structures that can change in future, how standardized suites of spaces can allow functions to change, and you can adapt to a school's changing pedagogies, you know, as it grows. But going back to that point about COVID, I think there's a question mark that I think we need to revisit, which is about whether there's a more strategic requirement in terms of flexibility and adaptability in our designs that we need to consider. We've all seen our schools have risen to this challenge remarkably over the last year, but it's been difficult to instigate things like one-way systems or, you know, operational issues like class bubbles. And we, you know, I think we do need to take a step back and just consider whether there are other more strategic, flexible and adaptable approaches we could start to take, particularly a key design challenge which I didn't put down in terms of climate change and you know, how we respond to this. So there are big strategic challenges we face that are going to throw up issues for design, where we are going to need to consider how we're flexible and adaptable to deal with them. And that last consideration, just going back to quality, you know, I put that in as a bullet point as a design challenge and probably spoke for maybe a minute on it, but I don't think we can underestimate how important a design challenge and a consideration that is for us. And I think we really need to consider how we prioritize that as a design process, you know, how we bake that into our design process, how we maintain, capture that understanding of what quality really means to a school, how we put that into the design documents that we provide, and how we translate that through to construction. You would think we all know what design quality looks like. You know, we're all professionals with a good understanding of how we design and deliver buildings, but you know, there is certainly and undoubtedly a requirement that we need to sort of put the focus back onto that and make sure that the schools that we're delivering as we go forward are, you know, are safe, are well built, and start to address some of these design challenges that I've mentioned. So that was really what I wanted to say. Hopefully there's lots of food for thought within there to kick off a conversation, and perhaps some questions as well. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you so much. That was a great way to kick things off. So next we're going to hear from Claire and Matt, who are going to actually present together. So Matt, I'll make you the presenter. And that should be fine for you to share now. We've already got some good questions rolling in, so if you want to get yours heard, please start sending it through so that we can start getting that all in order as well. And now I'll hand over to you guys.
Yeah, you just have to forgive me a second. The sharing function just doesn't seem to have picked up. There we are.
Yeah, it all looks good.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Simon. And perhaps just to sort of build on, if you like, where our thought process comes from here. So HLM and Reds 10 have partnered together on the MMC framework. We're part of lot 2, and a lot of the insight that we'll draw here is really responding to that question: how can the construction industry, in all its different parts, not just ourselves as a full turnkey design and build contractor, play the part, but the client side, consultants, and what role do organisations like HLM and Reds 10 have in overcoming some of the opportunities and challenges moving forward. Now, under the current framework, we're working on 7 projects that are live, some early stage design, some that are in manufacturing, and we have a large number of previous schools projects which we've delivered on, and that forms the basis of a few of the points of view that are in here. So first of all, I'll sort of outline the challenge as we see it, and some of the opportunities, and then the design and delivery considerations. That's perhaps where we'll spend a bit more time. Claire's going to pick up and actually bring some of this to life on a case study, which is one of our live projects, which is in play just now. So the challenge, I guess, just as Simon was saying, is multifaceted. So if the exam question is how do the construction industry come together to deliver projects, to deliver the schools program on time, on budget, and at 0 carbon, well, those are only 3 elements really of a much wider and more complex puzzle. The challenges the government have set out is to ensure that every child gets a world-class education. When you actually break that down, it's about creating the right environments to learn and thrive. It's about driving high performance, so whether that be in the assets, the spaces, or the schools themselves, making them more sustainable. And that sustainability isn't just about carbon, it's about maximising social impact, creating jobs, and also bringing about a different way of doing things. And that's possibly where we see one of the biggest opportunities in here. And making sure that they're fast-tracked. The government's made very clear commitments, has a big programme, and is determined to make sure that those schools get delivered. But as we know, fast tracking of those processes gets hampered somewhat in the planning process. And we also know that our industry doesn't have the best reputation for being the most efficient, and therefore the challenge is set in the context of quite a siloed and wasteful approach to certainly to traditional project delivery. So there's a big driver to speed up delivery in there as well. So I think just recognizing that, yes, cost and time are part of the question here, but it's a much broader issue than that. So the opportunity, and here I would just pause and actually reflect on what the Department for Education have achieved in their program so far. And again, I'm thinking mostly the MMC. What they've done is really the forerunner to the construction playbook, in that they've set this up as a program. They've defined that schools will be delivered in a certain way. They've allowed the market to come to respond in the best way that suits each provider by providing an output specification. They have a reference design, so very clear on actually the requirement that sits within there, and within the framework have built a potential for a delivery mechanism that should deliver really quite outstanding results in terms of not just the speed of delivery, but the quality of the spaces, the social agenda, and all that comes with that. So you then turn it around the other way and say, well, what's the supply side actually how are we going to respond? And that's where we see the benefit of a program presenting the opportunity for organizations to actually invest in doing things fundamentally different. We see those points of difference as being against a program actually being able to think and put the end user first. So to think about, what's the environment and the experience that we're looking to create for the children in those classrooms. To think about, when you come back from an end user first, think about, well, how are we going to enable the school to deliver on those outcomes through the assets that we're creating, and through a different delivery approach, how can we address some of the quality issues that Simon was flagging, perhaps using off-site techniques where we're better able to control quality. And we can think, because we're thinking about a program, and I'll come on to this point later on, what a program enables organizations to do is to consistently learn. And where you have an integrated approach to design and delivery, as we do on a turnkey solution working with HLM, what we're now able to see is as projects go live and as they go through each stage, we're continuously able to harvest the learning, whether it be about process, whether it be about design, whether it be about the delivery approach, and actually feed that back in. So taking those 7 projects I was talking about earlier, there are already 6 projects worth of learning being fed into the 7th project, and that's something that our industry has really struggled to achieve before, and it's something that I say the way the DFE have set this up, I think presents a massive opportunity, and certainly one that we're very focused on taking. There's also an opportunity to build manufacturing capacity. With that pipeline that we can see, we ourselves are making investment decisions in our own capacity, and I know that others in the market are doing the same thing. And that in itself, can be an enabler to the levelling up agenda. That program again enables us to understand the impact of carbon. We'll talk a little bit later on, but on the example that we'll use, we've built carbon calculators now built on the products that are there. And as the project is being configured, we're assessing that not just on its embodied carbon, but its impact on operational carbon as well. And on single one-off projects, which is the way that we've delivered things in the past, that's never been possible. And again, with the technology that gets deployed in the buildings, as the buildings are being used, we can harvest that data and feed that back into design of subsequent projects, when we can actually see how things are performing with full classrooms and changes in patterns of use. So faster as well, the platform opportunity presents the ability to drive invisible standardization with visible customization. So what do we mean by that? Well, certainly what isn't the intention here is to have a cookie cutter approach where we lose architectural integrity, and that we are slaves, if you like, to standard details. What it is an opportunity to get the efficiency from those areas that you can standardize without impacting on the aesthetic or the functional use of the building. There's also an opportunity to remove those silos in delivery. From our perspective, we have a vertically integrated supply chain, and that helps us find efficiency downstream, but the collaboration that we now have with our design partners, and HLM being one of them, enables us to remove those silos as well. And technology actually is the critical enabler to that. Some of the things that have happened in the last 6 months in technology development are really enabling that collaboration, and I think the delivery of this program can only happen with that collaboration and harnessed through those digital capabilities. And I think a number of you here will have seen the government's research. The opportunity is massive. The government themselves say that 49p in every pound spent on construction is waste. So the elimination of those silos, that platform thinking through programs of work and driving that continuous improvement, really gives you the opportunity to attack each one of those items of non-value adding cost and reduce cost and improve project delivery. So just thinking about some of the specifics, here obviously I speak as a supplier on the supply side, but if we're going to take the program that the government has to the next level again, here are a few thoughts from us on some of the things that we want to see changed. I think naturally there has been a focus on delivery because construction delivery has traditionally been held to be so inefficient. But when you boil it down, there's been a lot of development there, a lot of advancement. Programs are already shorter. We're harnessing technology. The next big area, as we see it, is on making sure that the feasibilities are set up in the right way in the first instance, so that site issues have been properly assessed, and that non-specific or site-specific issues, I should say, have been properly costed. And the first level of the marry-up between perhaps a site-specific brief and the output specification have been done properly. And I think if those things come together, then we know that actually we've got a project that is deliverable from the start. And actually some of the other things that we'll talk about, the benefits of standardization, can then come to fruition. You know, a delay in planning or a delay in being able to get stakeholders on board has a much bigger impact on the overall program than perhaps just the delivery end. So that would be an area of focus we'd see. I think it's fundamentally important, you know, if we talk about, you know, creating a different model that proves out MMC delivery at scale, we have to be able to blend those school-specific briefs with output specifications. Now that is a bit of well, it's a skillful exercise, and Claire will talk more through that when she talks in just a second. But it's really important that people, particularly the end users, don't just feel like here's the solution that you get, take it or leave it, or that they feel that there's a cookie cutter approach. So that is an area that we're, you know, particularly focusing on to make sure that we have all stakeholders on board, and we still meet the affordability criteria and the output specification. And that requires quite a degree of innovative thinking, creative thinking, and you know, we'd rather find savings downstream to make sure we invest the right amount of time there to end up with the products that the people want. I've said here standardized process as much as design. You know, there is a big focus on the standardization of design. You know, we like to think of our business as a platform. The government, through its seismic initiative, has its own views on where it might take platform thinking. But the process is as important. So if you take those 7 projects we're working on at the moment, making sure that you take the learning and make the process more and more efficient and more focused on where value is created is really where we see another opportunity for breakthrough performance. Changing mindsets on the cost of carbon, I mentioned it earlier, thinking about the evaluation of carbon at every stage of the design process, and having informed decision making and giving carbon as big a weight at the table as cost and program actually have as well, and developing the tools to make that happen. So you know, that whether it's past 2080 or, you know, whatever approach people use, that structured approach to putting carbon at the forethought of decision making is what will help get us there. I've mentioned technology, and Claire will talk about it later. But it isn't just using technology, it's setting up your processes, it's setting up your protocols to make sure that the whole team can collaborate. Some of the timescales in the case study that we'll share are just things we couldn't have dreamt of 2 years ago. And the standardization of that process, the incorporation of those into a technological approach is what's helping to drive that. I've mentioned the learn, improve, learn again. You know, when you're dealing with what is a manufacturing process and you have a program of work, you literally learn at every step, and every bit of learning is fed back into the next product. And for us, you know, new projects are coming off the end of the line every sort of 4 to 6 weeks. So you get a much quicker turn on that learning. And Simon made the point earlier that, you know, as an industry, we have to get better at capturing it and feeding that back into our designs, feeding it back into our processes. And I've mentioned the putting end users at the center of decision making. But you know, if you go back to carbon here, and you go back to the key opportunities, if our role here is to provide spaces where children can learn and thrive, and we can do that with as minimal impact on the environment as possible, we have to have a better understanding of the operation of the buildings and the performance of those buildings in operation. And again, technology you know, gives us the answer so that can be fed back into design. So Claire, I'm going to hand over to you just here, and so Claire's going to take us through one of our two-form entry primary schools down in Swindon.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, we thought we'd use Abbey Farm Primary School, as Matt said there, really as a case study as much as anything. It was the first school that we worked on through the MMC programme. And I think when we started it, it was in May last year. And it's interesting that Simon should mention COVID earlier. And I think that, right at the beginning, there was a, gosh, how are we going to do this? And the fact that we were able to do that and took that technology and worked to the programme, which is very tight, Matt has said that, to meet the DFE's requirements. We managed it very successfully, and I think we can just want to talk through how we did that and also sort of how we did it better. I think there's that, how to get to that best design solution. We talk about a school-specific brief and an output specification, and the idea there that there's a template, when actually I think because we've got this detailed understanding not only of how schools work and function, but how the building is going to be assembled, means that we can work that much quicker. The lower carbon comes into it by looking at everything so much earlier. We're getting an earlier supply chain. We're having those considerations about site, about planning, about context earlier on in the process, and that helps again to get that better design, whilst I suppose all the time kind of providing and allowing more certainty around costs. So I think what we have here is a situation, rather than designing a building that's made of sort of components and elements and where you might explore different materials and options more. We don't do that. We know what we're designing with. We've got those sort of base parameters, and I think that kind of opens up a much wider degree of flexibility for the team, so that we can then focus on the school-specific brief and provide that best outcome for the DFE and for the trust. So maybe if we talked a little bit about the how, and in terms of the programme, the next slide, Matt, has an example of our SEM process maps. It comes up in a minute. And we've developed that. Have we moved on?
Sorry, Claire.
Okay.
Has that moved on now?
No. Funny, isn't it? We've had a pause.
Just give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to stop presenting and start presenting again.
And I'll just explain for the benefit of the audience when we sort of talk about SEM process map. So the school engagement meetings, SEM, that we have with the trust and their advisors, in terms of the TA. We have a 6 to 8 week program for that, and what we've found through kind of working on school programs previously, that actually they work really well if we actually sort of split the whole approach into, we have weekly sessions, we'll have 2 a day, and what we'll do is take the trust on that journey through the design. So we start by focusing on, understanding what are those project values and objectives, hearing from the trust directly about their educational drivers. Here you see it's come up now. Thanks, Matt. And I know there's a lot of detail in there, and I wouldn't, but I think what it's really sort of saying is how we sort of feed through and how we bring in all of the consultants at each stage, because in order to, for example, define a site plan, we need to have confirmed the parking and the transport arrangements, and we need to have got a strategy around the sustainable drainage approach. And what are we going to do with biodiversity? So things come forward much more. When we're looking at the internal layout, we have our standard solution. We have the approach in terms of the building services and then the plant requirements, and how the building will be ventilated, and we can test that for the site-specific requirements in terms of sort of acoustics or air pollution, and that comes forward. So we know what it's going to look like in terms of daylighting, the window configuration, the FF&E, and small power and data and ICT are also critically important. I think there might have been a sort of thought once that that didn't come until later, until we'd got a layout fixed, but actually they very much help define and sort of design the internal layout for the school, because they need to know where each of these elements are. So bringing things forward into the design, we've been refining our approach and our SEM process map to reflect that and what we need when we'll have workshops with different consultants on the team, the sort of assembly side of the project. And really, the aim within that 6, and it can be either 6 to 8 weeks, to have finalised a design that everybody's happy with. We've ticked off it, satisfies me, but we've got that cost certainty. There is no surprise there. We know we can deliver it, we know we can build it, and we know that we can afford it. And then that follows on really swiftly into a planning application, as Matt had the duration earlier. I think it was planning to 10 weeks for this school. I mean, interestingly, our thoughts, if we go on to the next one, at the beginning of a program, you sort of have in your head that, oh, we're going to do a number of 2FE primary schools with a nursery. That's been the only one. The next 6 schools have been, so widely different. But we're able to work with a different schedule of accommodation, a different adjacency diagram and school-specific brief, because the team have got that deep and detailed understanding of how the building's assembled. Here we've got our standard details. So we're working at a very early stage with those standardized approaches. That enables us, it can give us that freedom to be more innovative, to provide a school and site specific design response. So it means that we can test things earlier. So I think, possibly at first people might have thought, oh, we haven't got the luxury within a 6 to 8 week SEM process to explore options, but we do, because we know what we're testing against. So each of those options are always very viable. And what it means is that at stage 2 is where the scope is for defining the program, as Matt was saying, planning, we've kind of got a very modern way of designing a building here and delivering it, but we've got a traditional approach quite often in terms of the sort of local authority processes. So we're putting those two together. But we know what stage 4 looks like, what really detailed understanding of that. It's stage 2 that we can start to do things differently. So we've obviously been working jointly, and these are all held. I think the next slide was quite good. We're working in a BIM 360 environment. So, less reliance on email traffic, actually kind of having all the information there from each sort of consultant available. We're federating models, we're doing live clash detection, and it has to be in this way because the SEM process is a weekly engagement with the school. So, we obviously have that engagement, we get the feedback from the trust and the DFE, and we're feeding that straight away back into the design and updating it and coordinating that with the wider design team. we'll raise issues and make sure that we're collaborating. And if there's a better solution, you know, would we incorporate that as it goes? You know, we're often looking at the detail here as a team and developing those. And you know, it's fair to say, isn't it, Matt, right at the beginning, and everybody's continued to, there's, you know, quite an investment from the team on part of that, but we're seeing the benefits of that, and we're passing those benefits on in terms of our design of new educational facilities for schools.
Thanks, Claire. And just that, you know, that last point, it's early days. You know, this Abbey Farm is currently in the factory under manufacture with some early site works that are going on. But you know, if we just move on to the next slide, there are, in terms of, you know, the proof points of this, what that platform and programmatic thought process actually does and brings. This is actually a program with the Ministry of Defence. But on that program, you know, we're 18 buildings delivered on site now, and another 16 waiting to go in. But just an example of how that thought process, standardization of processes, capturing the data from the building in operation and feeding that back into the design is making a huge difference on carbon on this, the NetCap program for the transit accommodation replacement in the Ministry of Defence, where EPC values only one measure of operational carbon, but you know, showing continuous improvement to the point where we're now generating more power than the buildings are using, and able to sort of identify the key uses of power and consumers of carbon, you know, in the building at any one time. So just to say that, you know, it's early days with that DFE MMC framework, but all the same conditions have been created by the MOD as the DFE are creating, and I fully anticipate getting the same level of result. So Jordan, back to you.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Just ask everyone to turn their cameras on and unmute if that's cool, because I think, just wait for, yeah, there we go. Simon's back now too. That was really great, a really great insight from everyone involved. So thank you so much for those presentations. I'll kick things off in the Q&A with a question from one of our audience members, just about the idea of quality, because that seemed to be a theme across the board from everyone, the notion of quality. And also, I suppose, the definition of quality in this sort of space. Essentially, the question centers on, do you think there's a place for the fit out of schools to be more, I'm trying to think of the right word, which is terrible. I had ages to do this and my brain has just gone blank. No, so do you think there's like sort of space for the DFE to, DFE or schools trusts to sort of come up with blanket statements on quality, or do you think it's really up to the individual project and individual project teams to sort of establish what quality means in the case of individual projects?
Do you want me
Matt,
to kick it off? And go on?
I'll kick it off, and others feel free to jump in. I think what's worked really well so far, and again, I talk from the MMC framework, is having a client who are clear about the affordability and have done a lot of research in understanding the drivers of performance and the drivers of quality in a base design and an output specification, has really actually held the industry to account, and it's creating a performance standard that people are having to step up to. And you know, there's a consultation on a new standard which is being put out just now by the DFE, which is going to push things on again. And I think in a learning environment, with an informed client, the DFE are not client who are biting off one project at a time. There's absolutely a place for that, and they've done it in the right way by keeping it at output rather than input level. I think, you know, there is always the tension between the trusts the DFE, and that, as I said, is the art of marrying together the site-specific brief with the output specification, and that's where if we want happy customers, we have to be good at that, we've shown, I think, on a number of our projects that it is entirely possible. And perhaps Claire, you want to pick up on sort of how that manifests itself. Simon, the same.
Claire, did you want to?
Yeah. Well, completely. I mean, I think from an architectural perspective, when engaging with trust, I think it's incredibly useful to have the DFE's output specification. I think what it does is it creates the sort of standard, and it's not a base standard, it's not sort of like a lowest common denominator. It's a very high quality benchmark that's being set that, as Matt said, really is well considered. So you can kind of clearly answer what type of door, what's the door specification, what's the wall, all of those internal finishes that trusts are concerned about. And I think particularly we've had it very recently. I was saying that we haven't had, it hasn't always been primary schools coming through. We've had quite a few SEN schools, and the need to design for robustness for those particular types of children. Actually, that's all factored within there, and the school-specific brief doesn't necessarily pick up on quality so much, but more about spatial and adjacency and operational issues that the school might have. So I think the quality, I think there is a need to set it. I think it's set very well by the DFE, and I think it's really helpful in terms of engaging with trusts.
I'd just like to add to it, because I think I absolutely agree with what you're saying there, and to go back to a point in your talk, the timescales can be incredibly pressing on some of these schemes. So you don't want to spend 2/3 of the chem process talking about the robustness standard on a partition. You want to have in place already, and we know how schools operate and what the key issues are through some of the work the DFE do. So there should be that baseline of quality. It doesn't mean to say that it's a low bar, but there's a standard of quality there that we deliver across all. And then it's the challenges for the design teams to really then liaise with the schools and the trusts and the people who are going to operate this and the pupils, and understand the particular quality issues that they have. And SEN's a great example, Claire, because that can throw up all sorts of bespoke requirements. We've worked on AP schools where kids are vaulting 3-meter high fences, and there's a baseline there for a security requirement that's in the GDB, but obviously that level of quality is not enough for that particular school. So these are the real design challenges, I think, in terms of quality that we need to, that dialogue is required.
Brilliant. So next question sort of from me, and I mean, we've touched on a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities across the board in everyone's presentations today, but I thought it might be really great if we could, I think maybe go in that same order we just went. So start with Matt, Claire, then Simon, and if everyone could just give the biggest challenge for the sector to be able to deliver on the school building needs, and then we'll swing back in the opposite direction. So Simon, Claire, Matt, and get everyone to say the biggest opportunity to do the delivering, if it sounds okay to everybody.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge from our side of things is it is a constant quest to redefine the way the whole delivery process works. I think if you approach these things traditionally, we run into all the same the same challenges. So I know from our side of things, our team here work endlessly to learn the lessons, take the learning, and then challenge things and say, well, why are we doing it this way? And typically what you find is that convention has said that's the way that we traditionally do things. Well, as Claire was sort of outlining, we're now in possession of knowledge with, just take standard details for one of them. There's so much learning in those standard details that actually it starts to challenge the roles within the team. And initially there's quite a bit of inertia to overcome there, because everyone's quite comfortable with what they do and challenged by change. But actually, when you get into it, you realise that the team are now focused on those bits where they can add most value. So I think that's the biggest challenge as I see it, is changing behaviours, changing the business model, and challenging the way that things have always been done, because we know the answer. If we carry on as things have been done, there's no chance of this program ever getting delivered.
Brilliant. Claire?
Well, probably something similar around perceptions. I do know, and I'm interested to see if Simon concurs with this, but often when we first meet a school trust, the idea that by the end of 6 to 8 weeks, that they'll have designed their school completely, and that we need to have them available every week to meet us and provide that feedback. It's actually really daunting to them, but it very quickly we overcome that. I find, I don't know about we sort of, week 2, because they've heard us in week 1, actually we're trying not to put a lot of pressure on. We're trying to just ask them the things that are important to them. They're the experts. So I think sometimes that time scale can appear challenging, but and that again is a perception thing, because people just have thought that, oh, we'd have that much longer, because that's, and people have, quite often these trusts have had building projects before, and it did take many years. But I think Matt's right. What you end up doing is focusing on those key strengths, and that's what it does. You're bringing in from the trust theirs, but we're focusing our time as architects on how to sort of pull that together. And I think the value is in that.
Brilliant. Simon?
I definitely agree with that perception issue. It can take me 6 months to decide what colour I'm going to paint a wall in a house, and then when you're confronted with 6 weeks to design a school, it's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do here? So there's definitely there's a big challenge there. I think the biggest challenge we've probably got, I think it goes back to quality for me, because it's just so related to so many of the bigger picture items we've got to consider, particularly around energy efficiency and the sustainability of these buildings. And there's going to have to be a big cultural shift, I think, in the industry about how we maintain that quality through the process from start to finish, so we're delivering buildings that do what we have designed them to do. So yeah, that whole sort of mindset change around quality is the big challenge, I think, that to me.
Brilliant. And on the flip side of the coin, what do you think the big opportunities are?
Well, just the amount of school building that's probably going to continue to happen. I mean, there's the contractor framework being retendered. We're seeing, the expectation is there's going to be big blocks of schools coming out through the pipeline. There's a lot that's going to be happening, I think, in the next few years. We've got great optimism about the amount of schoolwork we're going to be picking up in the next few years, and there's a huge opportunity for all of us there to really up the level of quality and design that we're going to deliver.
Brilliant. And Claire, any thoughts on the big opportunities?
Well, I think the opportunity, and keep it short, just noticing that it's really about the opportunities about affecting climate change. I think, with programme of work and what we've been talking about in terms of net zero, and what we know, we know how to deliver net zero. So, we're now doing it on all of the projects, and I think it's doing more within that kind of sustainability arena, that's alongside the great designs that we're producing with the programme of work.
Brilliant. And Matt?
The opportunity, as I see it, is to prove out that this program can be delivered through an alternative approach. Of course, I'm going to advocate MMC, but at scale, and to prove the doubting Thomases wrong. And to do that, there's an opportunity to create the delivery partner of the future, actually, and operate in a way that this industry hasn't seen before. And I know from talking to many clients, their major concern is not enough people are getting what's changing and what needs to change. And I think there's the opportunity, and one that we're certainly up for. But things have to change. There'll be those people who try and lead that change and get it wrong. We've seen some of that with Katira in the US. But actually, if you stay focused on customer, you stay focused on end user, and your business model, and don't get pushed around by people who try and encourage you to grow faster than you're capable to. I think there's a real opportunity to create the delivery partner of the future here.
Brilliant. And something that you've all sort of touched on is the sustainability net zero agenda. And obviously that is quite significant, and it has been made a focus of the latest projects as announced by the DFE. But do you find that there's that same buy-in from schools? Are schools on board to do what's necessary? I mean, obviously the construction companies need to be as well, but is there sort of an education piece to be done between schools and education companies about how this can be achieved?
Shall I go first on that one? I think absolutely. I mean, my experience is they're really excited. I think because children are, because the younger generation is. I think whenever we mention it, can't think of an instance of any resistance, or that it's something that I think all trusts in our experience have been really passionate about.
Yeah, I think the real excitement is where you see the schools that engage with this in a way where they, not only there's a bottom line to this, not only does it give them a building that's probably cheaper to run, but it's a learning resource for them, isn't it? They can use their building as a showcase, and they can engage the pupils through these net zero measures to sort of educate them about these issues. That's the real sort of excitement for me in that issue.
And it often marries with their ethos, doesn't it, as well? We look at different trust ethos, and sustainability and the environment is often one of them anyway.
Yeah, I see the ethos there. I see the passion there. I think the challenge for schools is they don't always have the technical know-how to operate a school for net zero carbon. And there again is the place for our industry to step up and actually provide them with the insight and the knowledge about what's going on inside their building, how much carbon is being used in operation, and what can be done about it. And moving away from the model where our industry's been for so long, where we hand over a set of keys and we've proved that everything works on the day that somebody walked around with a clipboard and went, yeah, that light works. But actually to stand behind our buildings for performance as well. And I think that's all part of this delivery model of the future.
Yeah.
So is that in terms of having softer landings for handover and things like that, instead of just being like, here's the keys, go have fun? There's an education.
It's softer landings. It's the golden thread that we're talking about. But I think mainly it's the data that can be fed back from IoT, and certainly what we've learned on that journey, where we've been trying to make inroads, is actually you can go too far with data. What people need is just tell me what I need to do, right? So you've got to turn that into a manageable action, so that changes behaviors within the school, so that teachers, caretakers, children themselves have access to seeing the decisions and choices they're making, just how much of a carbon footprint is that leaving behind. And I think for me, that's one of the bigger opportunities.
Brilliant. Did anyone else have any other points that they wanted to raise on that? Or we've only got a minute left, so I might just wrap it up also before my buzzer keeps going off and interrupting again. I'd like to thank you all for your time. It was really insightful. I'm really sorry about that as the way we're wrapping up. But also we've had a few questions coming through saying it's been a really great presentation. Can we watch it? Yes, you can watch it again. All the slides and everything will be available on demand by the same link you used to join today. I'd also just like to flag, we've got another session at 2 o'clock on the acoustic requirements of schools. So anyone who's interested in that, please, there's links on all our home pages, on our newsletters, on our events page. So please sign up for that one as well. Big thank you to our audience, big thank you to our speakers, and that's it. So thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.